So in this video, I'm going to see if I can bring some new life to my old table saw. Now, table saws are one of those tools that really scare the heck out of me. I don't like anything that has a spinning blade that I need to lean over. So I don't use a table saw a ton, and when I started this channel, I was doing mostly home construction projects, so that kind of limited what I needed one for. But now that I've been building more furniture and a little bit more complicated type of joinery methods and that kind of stuff, I really needed a better solution for working with that table saw. So the one that I have is the DeWalt 7485, and it's a good table saw and it's pretty safe. It has all the modern safety features like a blade guard and a riving knife. However, it does have some shortcomings, and one of which is it's not a big table bed, which makes moving larger parts and components across it a little difficult. It also can't be used with a dado stack, which means if I want to try to cut a rabbet or a groove into a board, it can get a little hairy trying to do it with a short bed and a lack of a dado stack. I want to see if this can bring some new life to my table saw and give me some extra factor of safety. So this is the Miter Express by Incra. And according to the packaging, it will work with any table saw and any miter gauge. Now, this does not come with a miter gauge. I have two options for a miter gauge. I have the one that came with the saw. We'll see if that works. And I also have a nice one from Incra that I use with my router table.
My first goal was to improve the stability on the infeed and the outfeed side. So having the Miter Express should give me a little bit of extra working room and a little bit more control as I push the piece through. The second thing I want to be able to do is I want to be able to cut dados and rabbets a little bit better. And that's kind of dicey with the way it's set up now. Now, I can't put a dado stack in the saw, but I can definitely cut it with a single blade just by bumping the workpiece over a little bit each time and running it through multiple times. But to do that safely, I need to make sure that the workpiece is held securely. So I'm hoping that this will help with that as well. Now, before you ask me why I just don't use my saw stop that comes with every YouTube account, well, YouTube changed their policies and that saw stop doesn't come until 10,000 subscribers. So go ahead and help me out with that and hit that subscribe button. I'm just kidding. It comes at 100,000 subscribers. So really hit that subscribe button. Now, getting a new table saw would be really nice, but right now I have a lot of other stuff I'd like to get, including one of these and maybe a better one of these. And also, since I have one of these, and not a lot of these, probably because I bought a lot of these, I think my best option here is to try to extend the life of what I have the best I can. Now, the Incra instructions are pretty good, and there's plenty of setup videos already out there on the internet, so I'm just going to go through the basic process and show you some areas where I had some problems. Now, everything was labeled really, really good, which made it super simple to find all the parts. They lay in pretty quickly, and all you really need to do is use the supplied Allen key and a screwdriver to pretty much put the whole thing together. Now, all saws have slightly different size miter slots, and they're not perfect. So there'll be a little wobble once you have it assembled, but you just tighten down these little hex bolts, and that will tighten it up to your slot so that it slides without having any give. With everything assembled and adjusted, it still slid through the miter slot a little rough. Now, this wasn't a problem so much with the Miter Express as it was with my table saw, which has this painted kind of top and wasn't the smoothest. But adding a little paste wax to both the groove on the table saw and the runner on the Miter Express solved this problem, and there it is, smooth as you could want it. This is also where I found my first problem. There are 4 of these little adjustment keys, and one of them was stripped out in the unit I got. I don't know why, but as you can see, it just freely turns and does not tighten. The one that was stripped was the 4th slot, so it didn't stop me from moving on to the next step, which was to push it through and cut off the board so that it formed a 0 clearance. Next up is to install this little metal strip, and this secures down the outfeed side of the Miter Express. Now, there's these little screws that lock this into place, and then the outfeed screws into it. One of them was frozen, though, and wouldn't budge no matter how hard I flexed the Allen key. Though there was a second one, and I was able to lock that in place so I could finish the assembly of the outfeed. When you attach the outfeed table, you want to use a screw set that gives you the most outfeed width while still giving you enough space that it covers the saw blade. You can now pass the outfeed through the table saw, forming the second part of your zero clearance. The Miter Express comes with these optional T-glide slides that fit into saws that have T-slots rather than standard miter slots. So for my DeWalt, these were great, and there's one that goes on the front and one that goes on the back to kind of lock it in place. It would have been nice to have an extra one in the middle as well to give it a little bit more support as you slid it through. These stick-on runners go on the infeed side of the table, and that's to raise it up a little bit above the outfeed and also make it slide easier. Even though the Miter Express advertising says it will work with any miter gauge, it will not work with one that comes with a T-slot type fitting like the one on my DeWalt. So unfortunately you'll need another gauge like this one from Incra that I used on my router table, so I was able to continue. And this installs in a pretty cool way. It comes with these cam bolts that drop in. This locks your miter gauge into place, so you don't have to fool around with the adjustment screws. So I use this miter gauge on my router table, and I didn't have to change any of the router table settings to use it with the Miter Express. So that was pretty cool. So did it bring new life to my table saw? Well, it definitely gave me some of the things I wanted. Here you can see I have more infeed length, and it works really nice as I'm cutting this rabbet. But if you look closely, you'll see a little hop there, and that's where that little T-glide kind of engages and disengages, which is why I would have liked to see one in the middle. Now, the cut was fine. There was some lines left over from having to bump over the saw blade each time, but that's more of an issue of me not being able to use a dado stack than anything else, and that was easily cleaned up with a chisel and some sanding. Now, for my fellow DeWalt fans that made it this far into the video, I did find a solution for that hop. If you lower the support material guide down, you can use it to guide the Miter Express through, and it will run nice and smoothly with no bumps. Just make sure you leave a gap between the fence and the Miter Express to make sure that you don't get any kind of binding between the fence and the blade.
Did the Miter Express save my table saw and bring new life to it? Well, the answer to that is yes, but it came at a cost. So yes, it gave me more stability on the infeed and the outfeed when I needed it, especially when I was doing tricky cuts like trying to do a dado or a rabbet into a funky shaped piece of wood or a glued up panel. It gave me the ability to do more accurate crosscuts and repeatable crosscuts because it had a nice stop. Well, the miter gauge had a nice stop built into it. Now that brings me to an important point. It did not come with a miter gauge, and despite saying that it would work with any miter gauge, it didn't work with the one that came with the saw, which had a T-stop style miter gauge. So I had to use another miter gauge. And luckily I had one that I used for the router table, and it was a really nice one, so it worked fantastic with the Miter Express. But again, it comes to the cost. Now, the cost of the Miter Express itself was about $165. The cost of the miter gauge that I used on that Miter Express was close to $300, and that was the Miter 1000 HD from Incra. If you're interested in any of these components, don't worry about me throwing out the numbers right now. I will put affiliate links in the description, so if you want to buy any of this stuff, support the channel, whatever, it's down there, so you can go ahead and look. The overall outcome is, yes, I can use this saw longer. It accomplished what I needed to do, but at a pretty steep price tag of a little over $400 total. Now, there are cheaper miter gauge options, and I'll also put a few of those in the description below, including ones from Incra that can get that cost down. The nice thing about the Incra Miter Express is that I can buy replacement components. That means if I choose to upgrade my saw in the future, I can still use the Miter Express. Even though I cut it for the DeWalt saw, I can buy new wood panels and cut those to the new saw and not have to reinvest in a whole new Miter Express to cut down. Another thing I want to mention, those two things that I had problems with, where one of the screws was stripped and another one where it was completely frozen, I guess exact opposites of each other, so I had a frozen screw and one that didn't work at all. But anyway, I reached out to Incra, or at least the one guy in Incra's service department that has his email on the website, and he got back to me right away, and they replaced all those components at no cost, and they came pretty quickly. I am really happy with this accessory for my table saw. I wish it cost less, but it is built well for the money I paid for it. The Miter Express itself isn't the most expensive thing in the world, but again, adding the miter gauge does raise that cost up. Now, if you're wondering why I just didn't
build my own crosscut sled, time is money as well. And it takes time to do that. And I have a lot of things going on. So I just didn't feel motivated to build one myself. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't. And if you do want to build one yourself, there are 100 other videos on YouTube that will explain how to do that one. Now, if you like this video and you want to support the channel, please subscribe, give us a like below, sign up for notifications. And if you saw any products that I used and want to buy them, hit up the description and check out some of our affiliate links. Occasionally there are some discounts down there for these different things that I show in my videos. And until next time, good luck with all your projects. And if you have any questions, concerns, or comments, leave them down below. I make sure to read through all the comments and answer every single normal person there. Well, even the not so normal people.